Somewhere in a forest right now, an insect is climbing to its death, and it has no idea why. Across the natural world, parasites and fungi have evolved something far more terrifying than venom or claws. They evolved the ability to seize the controls of another animal's brain. They turn living creatures into puppets, rewriting behavior to serve a stranger's agenda. These are 8 of the most disturbing body snatchers on Earth, and every one of them is real. The emerald cockroach wasp is a surgeon with a sting, and its victim is the common cockroach, an insect many times its own size. When a female wasp finds a roach, she delivers 2 precise strikes. The first goes into the thorax, briefly paralyzing the front legs. The second is the masterpiece. She drives her stinger directly into the roach's brain, feeling her way to 2 specific clusters of neurons that control the urge to walk. She isn't trying to kill it. She's performing neurosurgery. The venom doesn't paralyze the roach. Instead, it erases its will to flee. The cockroach can still move, still groom itself, but it has lost all motivation to escape. Now docile, the roach becomes a zombie the wasp can lead by the antenna, walking it like a dog on a leash back to her burrow. There she lays a single egg on its leg and seals it inside. The living roach simply waits. When the larva hatches, it chews into the still-breathing body and devours the organs in an order that keeps the host alive as long as possible. Roughly a week later, a new wasp emerges from the hollowed-out shell. The most chilling part, the venom keeps the roach's metabolism intact, a fresh meal that never decays because it isn't dead yet. A cricket walks to the edge of a pond, hesitates at the water it would normally avoid, and then leaps in to drown itself. The puppeteer is the horsehair worm, a creature that grows to many times the length of its host, coiled inside its body cavity like a living spring. The worm begins life as a microscopic larva swallowed by an aquatic insect. When that insect is later eaten by a cricket on land, the worm takes up residence and grows. It needs water to reproduce, but its host lives on dry land, so the parasite solves the problem by hijacking the cricket's brain. Researchers found the worm floods its host's nervous system with proteins that mimic the insect's own, disrupting the systems that control movement toward light and water. The normally water-avoiding cricket becomes irresistibly drawn to reflective surfaces. It marches to the nearest pond and jumps. As the cricket struggles in the water, the worm erupts from its rear end, sometimes a foot of writhing thread emerging from a body just an inch long. The worm swims free to find a mate. The cricket, if it survives the plunge, is left hollowed and stunned. Footage of this emergence is so unsettling that it regularly goes viral, a tangle of life pouring out of a drowning insect. This parasite is a barnacle, but you would never recognize it. It has abandoned the shell entirely to become something closer to a living root system. Sacculina targets crabs. A microscopic female finds a soft joint in the crab's shell, then injects a tiny slug of her own cells inside, discarding the rest of her body. Those cells grow into a network of tendrils that thread through the crab, wrapping around its organs, its gut, even its nervous system. Then the parasite does something extraordinary. It chemically castrates the crab and shuts down its ability to molt or regrow lost limbs. All the crab's energy is rerouted to the invader. A bulge forms under the crab's abdomen, exactly where a female crab would carry her own eggs. But these are the barnacle's eggs. The hijacked crab begins to care for them as if they were its own, fanning water over the brood and grooming the sac with tender devotion. Most disturbing of all, if the parasite infects a male crab, it chemically feminizes him. His body broadens, his behavior changes, and he too begins to nurse the parasite's young. The crab is fully alive, fully mobile, and completely repurposed into a surrogate parent for a creature that destroyed its ability to ever reproduce again. Look closely at a snail with throbbing, brightly striped tentacles, and you are watching one of nature's most grotesque illusions. The green-banded broodsac is a flatworm that infects land snails, and its true target isn't the snail at all. It's the birds overhead. The parasite needs to be eaten by a bird to complete its life cycle. Snails are too slow and dull to attract one. So the worm turns the snail into a lure. It grows long, pulsing sacs that push into the snail's eye stalks. Each sac swells with color, green and brown bands that throb and twitch. To a bird, the snail now appears to have two fat, wriggling caterpillars where its eyes should be. Irresistible prey. The parasite goes further. It alters the snail's behavior, driving the normally shadow-loving animal out into bright, open, exposed places during the day. The snail crawls into the sunlight, waving its grotesque, pulsating eye stalks like a flag, advertising itself to predators. A bird swoops in and tears off the eye stalks. The worm's eggs travel into the bird's gut and are spread in its droppings, ready to infect new snails. Astonishingly, the snail can regenerate its eye stalks, only to be reinfected and turned back into a living billboard for its own death. This one rewires the brain of a mammal, and possibly yours. Toxoplasma gondii is a single-celled parasite that can only reproduce inside one animal, the cat, but it spends much of its life cycle in rodents. To get from a rat back into a cat, the parasite has to arrange for the rat to be eaten, so it edits the rodent's most fundamental fear. Healthy rats are hardwired to flee the smell of cat urine, but infected rats lose that terror. Some studies suggest they become actively attracted to it. The parasite forms cysts in the brain and tinkers with the amygdala and dopamine pathways, the circuitry of fear and reward, turning a deadly predator's scent into something appealing. The rat wanders toward the cat. The cat eats the rat. The parasite reaches the only place it can breed. Humans get infected too, through undercooked meat or contact with cat litter, and an estimated quarter to a third of all people on Earth carry it. In most healthy people, it stays dormant. But research has linked chronic infection to subtle shifts in risk-taking, reaction time, and even certain psychiatric conditions. A parasite that manipulates mammal behavior, lodged in billions of human brains, and largely undetected. A caterpillar that should be helpless instead stands guard over its own murderers and lashes out to protect them. The parasitic wasp, Glyptapanteles, lays dozens of eggs inside a living caterpillar. The larvae hatch and feed on its blood and tissues from the inside. When they're ready, the larvae chew their way out through the caterpillar's skin and spin cocoons clustered on the leaf below it. You would expect the gutted caterpillar to die or wander off. Instead, something extraordinary happens. It stops eating. It stops moving away. A few larvae appear to stay behind inside the host, sacrificing themselves to keep manipulating its behavior. The caterpillar arches over the cocoons like a bodyguard. When a predator, a stink bug or other threat, approaches, it thrashes its head violently to knock the attacker away. Experiments showed that caterpillars guarding cocoons cut predator attacks roughly in half, dramatically improving the wasp's survival. The host doesn't eat. It simply stands watch over the brood of the creatures that devoured it, until it finally starves to death, once the adult wasps emerge. It is one of the few known cases of a parasite turning its victim into a willing, self-sacrificing soldier. Every evening at dusk, an ant climbs to the very top of a blade of grass, clamps its jaws shut, and waits for a sheep to eat it. This precise suicidal ritual is orchestrated by the Lancet liver fluke, a flatworm with one of the most elaborate life cycles known to science. The fluke needs to reach the liver of a grazing animal like a cow or sheep, but its journey begins in a snail, then passes through an ant. When an ant swallows the parasite, most of the flukes settle in its gut, but one migrates to a tiny cluster of nerves beneath the ant's brain and seizes control. At sundown, when temperatures drop, the hijacked ant abandons its colony, climbs to the tip of a grass blade, and bites down hard, locking itself in place. There it stays all night, positioned exactly where a grazing animal is most likely to swallow it at dawn. If the ant isn't eaten by morning, the parasite releases its grip. The ant climbs down and behaves normally through the heat of the day, avoiding being cooked alive. Then, at the next dusk, the cycle repeats, up the grass, jaws clamped, waiting, night after night until the ant is finally eaten. The single brain-controlling fluke dies in the process. It sacrifices itself so its gut-dwelling siblings can reach the liver and reproduce. This is the parasite that inspired video games and TV shows, and the reality is even stranger than the fiction. Ophiocordyceps is a fungus that infects carpenter ants in tropical forests, and it doesn't just kill them. It drives them, with terrifying precision, to a perfect graveyard. A spore lands on an ant and bores through its exoskeleton. Inside, the fungus grows as a network of cells, spreading through the body. Remarkably, scientists discovered the fungus doesn't actually invade the brain. Instead, it surrounds and weaves through the ant's muscle fibers, hijacking the body directly, while leaving the brain a trapped, conscious passenger. On a precise schedule, the fungus forces the ant to leave its colony and climb. It compels the insect to clamp its jaws onto a leaf vein, the famous death grip, at a height, temperature, and humidity ideal for the fungus to thrive. The ant's jaw muscles are so atrophied by the fungus that it can never let go. It dies locked in place. Then a stalk erupts from the back of the dead ant's head, growing upward and raining spores onto the colony's trails below. Fossil leaves show these exact death grip bite marks from 48 million years ago, meaning this fungus has been puppeteering ants since before our species existed. 8 creatures, 8 stolen bodies, each one a reminder that in nature, the most powerful weapon isn't strength, it's control. Which of these unsettled you the most? Tell me in the comments. Subscribe for more true stories from the strange edges of biology.